my prayer, my hope is that by the leading and guiding of the Spirit, that God would stir our affections. God would stir our hearts for a deeper love and commitment and reliance on God's word. A deeper passion and a deeper longing to, yes, be a learner, but be a learner that is transformed more into the person of Jesus from the truth of his words. You know, growing up in the church, you know, I had amazing parents, loved them to death. And I remember it's not even like a sad story. It's like, I remember almost every single morning getting up, walking down the stairs, and I can still picture it because it's still happening. It probably happened this morning. My mom sitting on the couch, Bible open, and my dad in his office in the room adjacent, Bible open, reading the scriptures. And that image, that has stuck with me. You know, and it wasn't just the fact that they read their Bibles, it's that they had the character and the Jesus-like posture to match it. And they were a people, and they are a people that are formed and shaped by God's word. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but that's my prayer, that's my hope, is that we would be these kinds of people that are so reliant on the scriptures, and that as a little boy coming down the stairs where I thought most mornings, especially middle school and high school, like, what a waste of time, you know? I'd rather, you know, go play baseball or go hang out with my friends than read this ancient text. And that was primarily my relationship with the Bible for most of my childhood. I wasn't like a total rebellious kid, but my really only connection with the Bible was, other than seeing my parents have this deep love and commitment for the scriptures, my sort of relationship was more along the lines of, I loved baseball growing up, and so I'd write Philippians 4:13 on the bottom of my baseball hat. You know, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, which translated into my, you know, version was, I can hit a home run through Christ who strengthens me. Right? So a total hijacking of God's word to suit my own purposes. But that was sort of my sort of relationship with the Bible growing up in the church. But it wasn't until the end of the summer going into my junior year of college. I was about to head off. I started at community college. I was about to transfer and head off to the University of Washington in Seattle. The first time I was really going to move away from being in my parents' home. And I remember we were with our young adults group at the church I grew up in. We took a camping trip out to the San Juan Islands up in the Pacific Northwest. Amazing, amazing place, especially in the summer. And we were out there at Friday Harbor. We spent the whole kind of afternoon and the whole day really kayaking, out in the San Juan Islands, just kind of out in the ocean. We could see, you know, killer whales out in the distance, just a beautiful panoramic scene that you just can't compete with. It's just amazing up there in the summer. But I remember that evening, after the first full day there, our pastor, who was still a great friend and a huge mentor to me, was leading our sort of, you know, campfire sort of Bible study. And I remember, and I can still picture, me sitting there, and he's talking about the importance of the scriptures and the importance for people to have their sort of compass, if you will, directed by God's word. And he gets up with one of those campfire lanterns and begins to talk about Psalm 119, verse 105, that says, your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And he begins to walk around, and he's talking about just as a young person, not knowing about my future and what God was going to do, just the importance of God's word being the lamp unto my feet, just for that next step. You know, not like this like beam of light that was going to give everything I ever wanted to know about the future, but the light that I needed, the lamp that I needed for that next step, that whatever God had for me right in front of me. And that was keyly tied to the importance of God's word. That your word, God's word, is a lamp unto our feet, a light unto my path. And for whatever reason, by God's grace and God's mercy, that moment just completely hit me in the best sense. Where all of a sudden, my affections and desires for God's word, I just begin to just start reading the scriptures really on my own for the very first time. And begin to have like this hunger for understanding a little bit more, like what is God trying to say through these ancient texts? What does God have for us as his people through the scriptures? And I began reading the Gospels and, learning more about the person of Jesus. I remember our young adults group was going through the book of Hebrews, and it was this weird sort of experience. Like, the author of Hebrews really is riffing back on the Old Testament and all these, sacrifices. And then personally reading the Gospels on my own, just really in depth for the very first time, and noticing Jesus and many things about Jesus. But one thing that really honestly stood out was his constant alluding to and quoting from and talking about the Bible and how important it was for him. And so I began to really understand for the first time that as a follower of Jesus, to be a follower of Jesus would kind of necessitate that I too would be a person that followed Jesus in engaging with the scriptures just as Jesus did.